8%. It will be shown to your screen briefly as we narrate some of these figures that we'll be seeing. This increase was mainly driven by food and non-alcoholic beverages, restaurant and accommodation services, and transport. This is according to the NBS. The inflationary trend to food, beverages, clothing, and footwear, which were the major contributors to price movement during the period. And this also shows the growth in that aspect of the economy of Nigeria. Meanwhile, the NBS said the rebasing was necessary to ensure a more accurate reflection of inflationary pressures in the country. Unfortunately, many Nigerians have become poor due to high inflation rate challenging the Nigerian economy. Particularly, the causes of high inflation include insecurity, poor economic policy, the devaluation of the naira, and pre-election campaign spending that normally follow with issues of election across the country. But though we are not in election period this time around, but the twin government policy of removal of subsidy and devaluation of the currency has really put a peg to the recent inflation cost in Nigeria. Joining me to discuss the issue of inflation today will be Dr. Samson Simon, a chief economist at ARKK Economist Data Limited. He will be joining me through the virtual experience to explain what he thinks the inflation is all about and how we can tackle this Nigerian inflation that is at least moderately, according to NBS, 24.48%. Because if you check out ordinary Nigerians, when you talk about the high cost of living, sometimes this figure doesn't reflect what the government is saying, but it is much higher in that regards. Dr. Simon will be joining me through the virtual experience. Hello, Dr. Simon. Okay, we are still. A very good day to you, sir.
I'm on the call.
All right, sir. All right, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, doctor. So, let's get the ball rolling. What was your reaction yesterday when you saw the headline inflation as released by Nigerian Bureau of Statistics?
Well, the expectation right from the moment when it was announced that it will be rebased, Consumer Price Index.
Exactly, CPI.
The expectation right from the beginning has been that the figures will most likely come down. And that was exactly what happened. The figure for headline inflation for December was 34.80. And then after the rebasing for January has reduced by more than 10 percentage points to by something in the region of 10 percentage points to 24.48%. So it was expected, but the major problem is that some people may construe this to mean that prices have actually come down, or that inflation is coming down. No. Inflation has not come down. Prices have not come down. I don't need. Nobody needs to be told that prices have not come down, because we buy items every day, and if prices are coming down or they have come down, would have felt that. But I believe nobody has seen that. So basically, what they have done is to update the statistics, the methodology, and the information they have been using. The last time we updated, we chose 2009 as the base year. And this thing is supposed to be done every 5 years. So that means we're seriously lagging, because from 2009 to 2024 is 15 years. So that means we should have done this, at least this should have been the third or the fourth time that we're doing it in that space of time. But we're just doing it once after 15 years. So we're seriously lagging. And by the basin, we're trying to update the information we get pertaining to inflation, so that everything we're using, any number we're bringing out or the MBS is bringing out, would reflect reality. Because consumption patterns would have changed over the course of 5 years, and in our case, 15 years now. And even the economic dynamics might not be the same. I can cite an example. In 2009, I don't think Uber or Taxify was in Nigeria. It has become commonplace now, and there are many other items too. So all these things need to be captured. You look at the way things, the patterns, the trends, and so on, and capture them. And basically, that's what the rebasing has done, to update the information around inflation. And even if you look at the method of gathering data, before now, they used to use, the MBS was using paper to sample the opinions of people. Now they have moved digital, and If you ask anybody, that's the right, is the right way to go. And even the number of items surveyed, it used to be 740, now we're talking about 936. So there's a lot of things. We have updated, we have become more current and more reflective of realities on ground now.
Very fantastic from you, Doctor. Now, one thing that the NBS say about their new data, the new methodology, the basing exercise, is that it's going to bring about credibility of Nigerian inflation figures. Are you in agreement with that? That it's going to bring credibility, although credibility on paper, credibility to the hearings of international business community, but ordinary Nigerians, that may not be in that credibility, because if you check the reality, there could be far gap between what the document is saying or what the data is saying and what we found in the market. But from your own angle, from your own assessment, do you agree with them that there's credibility in this data as put forward?
I think what the credibility the MBS might be talking about is when you are changing your figures to reflect new realities. Mind you, by using 2009 as the base year, we'll be comparing prices to 2009 prices. So that's way ancient history. But now with this new methodology, we are comparing prices to 2024 statistics. And we feel that really reflects what is actually happening. If we are comparing, we can even compare data to 1960 prices, but we know that's a long time. A lot of things might have taken place. So with the current methodology, things, the data, the figures that will be coming out will be more reflective of things happening now. For example, I remember when the last time we were doing it, some things are not were not captured then. Some of these things can be captured now. For example, food contribution to CPI, it used to be more than 50%. It has been reduced to 40% because the consumptions of Nigerians might have been checked, and food maybe for the lower income people, it might even consume everything. But on the whole, on the average, because this is an average for everybody, it reflects everybody, the contribution of food to spending might not be up to that. And then it's not like because we are talking about food items now, there's another index that has been created for restaurants. Because some people eat out, a lot of people eat out, even laborers eat out. You don't have to be wealthy to eat out. And some people are bachelors too, they eat out. So that has been increased tenfold. So they're trying to reflect the realities on ground. And as much as possible, it's not a perfect model. Of course, it has shortcomings. If you have something better, or anybody can come up with something better, why not? There's always room for improvement. It's not a perfect thing, but it's more reflective of recent happenings than what we had it before. And that means more credibility.
But what if I could understand it very, very well and could also chip in this, will it also help us to understand the issues or grasp the issues around our microeconomic challenges? Because inflation boils down to microeconomy indicators, indices, and the rest of them. So does it help us to understand that in a longer way?
Of course, it's supposed to help us to know what is actually happening when it comes to general economic trends. The economic trends in Nigeria 2024 might not be the same. I believe everybody will accept the fact that it cannot be gainsaid that happenings, the trends in 2004 are quite different from the trends in 2009. And when trends have changed, when patterns of consumptions have also changed, you expect inflation and other macroeconomic variables too to reflect that. Even let's cite an example. Look at inflation. Look at import and export with the coming of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Things have changed, right? And you cannot say things are the same. Even our exchange rate. What was the exchange rate before the coming of the current president? And what is the exchange rate now? All these things affect inflation, and you need to update your methodology, you need to update the collection of data, you need to update the weight of each item that you are also taking data for, so that it will be reflective of reality. So all these macroeconomic variables would have changed. And even look at our interest rate. When was the last time we had this high interest rate? All these things need to be reflected in everything that we do, because all of them feed into our inflation. And that's what they're trying to do. And it's supposed to be done every 5 years.
Eh,
So we should be doing this by 2029
mhm.
or 2030 now, if
Yes.
we are going to stick to the global best practice of doing this.
Exactly. I mean, sticking to the global best practice also enhance the understanding of what the NBS is doing. I think one of those additional introduction of new special area, the indices they added was the energy index. What do you make of the energy index that are coming to this rebasing exercise that NBS have brought up? Because I've seen people talking about the food import index, farm produce index, but this energy index, how does it come in, and how can Nigerians understand this as part of the rebasing so that we can understand inflation figures in Nigeria?
Well, energy is an important part of any economy, and of course, it contributes to change in prices. Whether prices are going up or prices are coming down, energy is an important part of that.
Hmm.
And creating a special index for prices will only reflect realities, will only reflect the changes that have taken place. And I can bet uh, with anybody that the energy situation in Nigeria in 2009
Hmm.
and the energy situation in 2024 are not the same.
Hmm.
An obvious example would be the Dangote refinery.
Hmm.
We didn't have Dangote refinery. In 2009,
Hmm.
we were hardly refining crude in
Hmm.
Nigeria. Now we're refining. If you look at even for electricity,
Hmm.
what were the charges per unit of electricity in 2009? What are the charges? We're talking about band A, band B, and
Hmm.
so on now. We were not talking about that in 2009. Even the entire privatization of the electricity sector in Nigeria. So all these things are important, and we know all these things feed into the inflationary pressure that Nigerians feel.
Hmm.
So there's a need for a special index for it,
Hmm.
so that we can be conscious of happenings, and that will also guide government policy, because if they know the data, they listen to the data, they
Hmm.
are guided by the data, then they are going to make more targeted policies, and those policies will be more effective, instead of just using an outdated set of data
Hmm.
that is likely like you're groping in the dark, and you're not even sure of what you're doing,
Hmm.
or when you do things, you don't see the desired results because the data is not reliable.
Exactly. And now talking about energy, just yesterday or this morning precisely, we heard that the megawatt have increased by 5,535 as of today, talking about the energy production in Nigeria. And from this energy index that NBS has also introduced, will it also give government the opportunity to take advantage of understanding the energy poverty gap in Nigeria and taking the opportunity of it to improve on it? Do you see that coming that way?
Of course, we are energy poor in Nigeria.
Hmm.
We're a country of more than 200 million people, and how much electricity is being produced, at least from the national grid. Because if you factor in private production of electricity, you may realize that our situation may not be as bad.
Hmm.
But it's the primary responsibility of government the world over to provide energy for its population. And if the government has failed, like in the case of Nigeria, and private individuals are picking up the slack, that is not really good. It's a big indictment of the
Hmm.
government, and everything must be done, like the privatization that we saw. But it's not just about privatizing. It's not just about throwing money at problems. We need to see results. And if you look at it, it's not even efficient for private people to be generating their own power. Imagine what the company will spend on diesel
Hmm.
for you to power its plant. Compare that with even the band A that people are complaining that is outrageous. It's still way better to pay a band A, to pay for band A, than for you to use your own generating set and generate your own power. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Hmm.
The government can only go as far. So the private individuals, private investments, PPP, and so many other ways can be done. I remember under the last president, they were working hard towards an agreement with Siemens.
Hmm.
And sadly, even the president chief of staff passed
Hmm.
because he had to travel to Germany
Hmm.
and he got COVID. So I don't know. We have not heard about it again since that time, and
Hmm.
even under the new president. I'm not saying that it must be done with Siemens, but if, in all honesty, we realize that we're not able to uh, tackle some of our problems, there's nothing wrong with going cap in hand
Hmm.
to other people that have successfully done and ask for help. Of course, it's also business for them, and we can give them all the guarantees that they need so that we solve this problem. And lack of power has been a major challenge for Nigeria and has really stopped the progress that Nigeria is supposed to be a superpower, an economic superpower, but we're still lagging. Even on the African continent, we're no longer the first. Even if we were the first, what's the size of the GDP? We're way better than that. And one of the major challenges is because of our energy sector. We need to fix the problem of power, and everything must be done. All hands must go on the decks. All hands must be on deck to fix that problem. So everything should be done. 5,000 megawatts is nothing to celebrate compared to our population. I know progress has been made, well, kudos to the government, but we're still way, way, way below what Nigeria is capable of doing and what Nigeria really needs.
Exactly, I agree with you on that. Now, talking about the inflation figure that NBS, really brought out yesterday, the headline stand at 24.48. Meanwhile, food inflation is 26.08. Doc, food inflation still very high as it stands. We have the problem of it, and just help us out to unravel this food inflation figure as it stands and the challenges within our food security in Nigeria.
Food inflation at 26.08 might seem good, at least considering where we're coming from December, because we were almost touching 40. We're pushing 40 in December. And by the way, I might be sounding like a broken record. Prices of food inflation has not come down. It's just the methodology that has changed, and then the numbers too have changed. It's not like the prices, because if you ask anybody between December and January how much he was buying food items in December and how much he's buying them now, I believe me, that the difference might not be much, and maybe prices are even climbing. Some food items are actually coming down, but on the average, prices are going up, they're not coming down. So, and the ideal inflation level globally is 1 to 3% or 2%. And as a country in Nigeria, we felt that we cannot achieve that. It's impossible for us to do 2% inflation per annum. And we opted for 6 to 9%. Even at that 6 to 9%, we have been doing abysmally bad, because even at this 26.08% for food is terrible. And mind you, if you look at the food security index, Nigeria is the worst place on earth when it comes to affordability of food. Nigerians cannot afford Nigerian food. And then when it comes to availability, we may not be the last country on the ranking, but we are amongst the last. We are at the bottom quintile of that ranking. So we're doing so badly when it comes to food security, and everything must be done. And it's not about asking Nigerians to go to farm. Every Nigerian should be a farmer. I know even for civil service, you're not allowed to do any business, but you can be a farmer. And the Nigerians over the years, even the authorities over the years, have been encouraging Nigerians, but that's not the solution. It has never worked. Obasanjo, as a military head of state in the 70s, had Operation Feed the Nation. Shehu Shagari continued with the Green Revolution. And since then, they have been trying, but we have failed woefully. And the reason is because we're still using hooves and cutlasses to come. There's a lot that needs to be done. And it's not about throwing money at the problem. Under Buhari, the approach is central bank, and then they were printing naira and giving to farmers, and the money was not being used well. So we need to be careful. We want results, and I know financing is one of the reasons, but we have to ensure that the money that is being assigned or being loaned to farmers, such is being used well and is not being wasteful at all.
Exactly.
So we need to modernize agriculture. If you look at our horsepower per hectare, is one of the least in the world. So there is a need for tractorization. There is a need for modern farm practices, and even our land tenure system. We need to reform that. There are a lot of things that need to be done, but I don't think we really have the will. Even if you look at our budget, 2025 budget, we're talking about 50 trillion. The supplementary budget it has increased by almost a tenth of what was presented initially. And what is the allocation? What is the budget for agriculture? It's less than $1 trillion. This is a country that is the last when it comes to food affordability. Nigerians cannot afford food. that means the prices are too high for Nigerians, and you're allocating maybe 1% of your budget. It doesn't augur well, in my view. So we need to do a lot more. And 26.08 is still very, very high. And that's even the official figure. I believe if other sources, some of us that are not comfortable with these numbers, the thing is that we have not provided alternatives that are really credible. But of course, we feel like the problem might be will be worse than what the numbers are saying. But for now, these are the official figures, and even though it has come down to 26.08, it's still very high. A lot of people are still struggling to feed themselves. So there's still a lot that needs to be done. We need to fix agriculture, and fixing agriculture, in my view, is modernizing agriculture.
Exactly.
Modern
Doctor, so sorry to continue. I quickly want to say that the current government is trying to do as much as possible on mechanizing agriculture. They have been able to order for 2,000 tractors and plowers that are going to distribute to farmers. We are still expecting most of them to come in. I think before December last year, about 250 of those tractors came in. So more of that is still expected. Now let's also take a look at another issues around this inflation figure. Urban inflation is 26.09. Meanwhile, rural inflation is 22.15%. I'm concerned about rural inflation. What do you have to say about this rural inflation? When we also know that this is where the food is, but there's a great inflation in our rural area that's affecting them. What could have account for this inflation in the rural area that could as high as 22.15%?
You know, when the main contributor to inflation is food items. Headline inflation is food item, and I know the rural areas where food is actually being cultivated, but the people in rural areas are not immune to high prices of food, and some of them farming is their means of livelihood. So they farm and they sell. Some of them, sadly, they sell everything when it's harvest time, and then towards rainy season, they have to buy at higher prices. So these things contributed. These things contribute rather to the inflation even in rural areas, and it's not only about food. If you look at even for clothing, people in rural areas still have to buy clothes, they have to buy footwears, and all these items. They might not be paying so much for rent, or some of them might even be living in their own houses. They don't pay rent at all, or they are paying way lower compared to those of us that live in urban centers. But that doesn't mean that they don't pay for rent. And when prices are going up, the increase in prices affects everything. It has this ripple effect. Even for when the devaluation of the naira happened, some people were saying that because of exchange rate, mainly for imported products. But you go to the same market, and when prices are becoming too expensive for you, even though you're not selling an imported product, you may like to increase the prices of your items too, so that you have enough finance or enough cash also to buy those imported products. So these things are not limited to urban centers. Those people in rural areas are also affected, and that's why you also have rural inflation this high. And compared to the one for December, there's a big improvement.
Exactly.
Just like for the other components of inflation. So a lot of work needs to be done.
Now, I don't want us to focus on the urban inflation 26.09 because we are all in urban cities, so we know what is happening on the urban city. But one thing that NBS draw our attention to, which we must pay attention closely to, is that food, beverages, clothing, and footwear were the major contributors to price movement. Doc, footwear and clothing. My mind will not push me to be saying imported clothing or imported footwears. What do you have to say about that?
We all know the clothes we wear and the footwears too. They're largely imported. And even if we don't import some of them, the machines we use to make them are imported. So all these things feed into inflation. And mind you, food is a major reason for high inflation. That's why food inflation tends to be higher than core inflation and headline inflation.
Exactly.
It's the main driver of inflation. So all these things feed into the fact that we're having so the inflationary pressure being experienced by Nigerians today.
Now, going forward, so that we can begin to profile solutions to some of the issues that have been raised by the inflation data, as well as what NBS is also calling for. First, credibility of the data is here. They have asked Nigerians to ensure that they preach the data in a more accurate, not misinterpreting them. That's what NBS is saying. So, for you, what would be your advice to NBS with this kind of data they have? Because a lot of people are still here to comprehend the rebasing. A lot of people are still here to comprehend what is the inflation is all about, because they reflect it to what is on the street and what NBS is saying. So what do you think NBS need to do as form of education, advocacy, and sensitization on the rebasing CPI, that is Consumer Price Index, this inflation that have come, and all that they have been doing together to inform Nigeria in a credible way?
I think when they were making an announcement about the based inflation figures, the statistician general was very explicit that this does not mean that prices have actually come down. And we don't even need him to tell us that prices have not come down. It's something we experience on a daily basis. Prices have not come down. Inflation is still very high, uncomfortably high, and a lot of us are feeling the pinch of these high prices. So some people, maybe for political reasons, will push that narrative that maybe the president is doing well, he made inflation at this and this. That's not actually correct. I know, trust me, politicians will use that. They want to score cheap political points by claiming that inflation has come down. Just like for unemployment, it was 33% before we changed the methodology and it magically became 5%.
5%.
It's not like more Nigerians have been employed.
Exactly.
The same thing for inflation. Even though it has come down from 34.8% to 24.48%, that doesn't mean that prices are coming down. That doesn't mean that we are better off because of that. The only thing is just for policy and maybe for foreign investors, because when you're making policy, you want whatever policy that you're proposing to be targeted, to be effective. So this will better guide you to know exactly the nature of the macro economy in Nigeria, particularly when it comes to prices. So it will just guide policy. But there is no yet the hoodoo for Nigerians. We're still feeling the pinch, the devaluation of the naira, the removal of subsidy. They have done incalculable damage to our standard of living, and Nigerians are struggling. And the government should not rest and think that, all right, it is 34, now it's 24, so we can relax, we can keep a sigh of relief. There's nothing to keep a sigh of relief there. There's a lot of work. The same work they had last year, where it was 34%, is the same work that they have now, that is 24%. So a lot of work needs to be done.
Now, talking about the government, you have talked about, at least NBS have collected some advice and some suggestions from you. The government specifically, first, food inflation. I earlier said they are trying as much as to bring about mechanized farming. They are importing about 2,000 tractors. About 250 of them came into Nigeria in December last year, 2024. We are still expecting the rest of them. So what is your advice to the government in fighting food inflation critically?
Well, I think they are doing well by importing 2,000 tractors. It is a step in the right direction. But mind you, we're a country of over 200 million people. And 2,000 tractors, kudos to them, because it means that we're making progress, no matter how snail pace that progress is. I think we need to be appreciative. At least we have taken the right steps. But there's a lot that needs to be done. And I'm not asking the government to do everything. They should just create the enabling environment so that people can easily get these tractors, so that people can easily mechanize their agriculture, their farming. So they should create that conducive environment. Another major challenge, which I feel might even be more pressing than mechanization or tractorization, is insecurity. We need to tackle insecurity. Not paying lip service to tackle insecurity. I remember one of the government officials talking about the bandits in the Northwest being defeated, and I just laughed that for the fact that there was an operation, that doesn't mean it's the end of banditry, because that was the way he was sounding. He was trying to come across as actually defeating banditry. banditry is heavily there. They might have dealt a blow or two to them, but we need a permanent solution, not just you cosmetics. We are tired of cosmetics. We need results. You need to tackle banditry, and banditry is not the only form of insecurity that we have that is affecting farming activity in Nigeria. A lot of them, there are so many of them to mention.
Exactly.
So everything must be done, get to the root causes, and try to tackle these problems, try to end them for good, so that people can comfortably go back to their farms without worrying about being kidnapped or being killed. I think that's the primary thing. And the modernization.
Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
The modernization, tractorization is just one part of modernizing agriculture. There are other farm inputs that we need to have improved breeds of, so that all these problems around agriculture can be tackled, and we can have enough food supply for the Nigerian consumer, and even the possibility of exporting.
Now, talking about another suggestion I want from you for the government, the core inflation is about 22.59, and when you talk about the core inflation, it's outside the food environment. Transportation cost is very, very high in Nigeria, and that's what even MBS even made mention of it in their passing when they were talking about these inflation issues. So what's your advice to the government on transportation in Nigeria? We know that they are pushing money into railway, they are pushing money into road infrastructure, but this has not really helped in a long way. So what's your advice to the government on tackling transportation issues that led to some of this core inflation that we are seeing today?
We have huge infrastructural deficit in Nigeria. Huge infrastructural deficit. We're a developing country. We have a long way to develop. And if you look at the quantum of resources, we need to upgrade our infrastructure to be on a par with the most developed countries in the world, or even countries that are ahead of us, not necessarily those most advanced economies. Is a lot of resources. Even if we dedicate the entire budget to transportation, I don't think it might be enough to move the needle. And that's why it's important for us to create that enabling environment. There's nothing wrong about private individuals getting involved in the transportation sector. They might not be constructing route, but even if it comes to that, there's nothing wrong about that. But we need to modernize our transportation system. It's still, I lived in Lagos until recently, and Lagos is arguably the most sophisticated city in Nigeria. The transportation system, despite what the Lagos state government is doing, they're doing their bit, but it's not really enough. You're talking about a big city, a mega city, and you need private businesses coming in. If not, it will continue to be in a shambles. And just the way it is in Lagos, in Abuja, is the same thing all over. And that's why you see our leaders in Nigeria. In Nigeria, they would never take a public transport. They will never take public transport. But then when they travel abroad, they are comfortable. You see a senator taking a train in America or in Europe, they will never take our train unless maybe they're afraid of insecurity, like in the case of Abuja. So we need to make it like it's normal. We need to normalize it. We need to make it comfortable for everybody, and it should not be seen as a big deal for even the upper class to use our public. But we need to fix it. We need to upgrade it. We need to modernize it for all of us to be okay with that.
Right. Thank you so much, Doctor. I'm so glad to have you on the show. And expressly and in a very vivid point, you have submitted your own observation and your view regarding this inflation. Thank you so much for being on the show today. We are so glad to have you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And I know when I call you the next time, I hope you're available for us.
Of course.
Exactly.
All
right. Thank you so much, Dr. Samson Simon. It has been a wonderful time having Dr. Samson Simon on the show today. Helping us to dissect the issue of, inflation in Nigeria, the remedies to tackle the challenge of inflation.